Good morning, everybody. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Mr. Bunce. I'm alumni coordinator for the school. Before becoming alumni coordinator, I taught senior English here for 32 years. And one of my first classes was Mike's class. Mike graduated in 1986. His parents, Mary and Les, are longtime supporters of the school and have served Villanova in many ways throughout the years. Mike is the proud little brother, the best and most compassionate big brother, Joseph, who was class of 1984. Mike attended college for 3 years before joining the Ventura County Sheriff's Department in 1990. Mike trained in a 19-week academy and worked at the Ventura County Main Jail, then went on to patrol in East Ventura County. Mike worked in patrol for over 15 years in Thousand Oaks, Moore Park, Camarillo, Oxnard, and the city of Ventura. Mike has also worked as a detective in murder, kidnapping, and drug trafficking cases. And Mike has also spent 15 years as a hostage negotiator and has taught over 5,000 elementary and middle school students in the DARE program. Some of you, I'm sure, are graduates of that. Okay. Mike also spent 4 years as a drill instructor at the Ventura County Sheriff's Academy. I've seen him working. And this year graduated over 300 officers and deputies. Mike has also trained school resource officers in active assailant preventions and performed studies of mass shooter situations, school threats, and has performed training on what to do during an active assailant situation in schools. Mike is also a supervisor at the Todd Road Jail, mentoring and training new deputies. And I'd like to present one of my former students that I'm amazingly proud of, Deputy Mike Baker.
You gotta wait for me to say something. It's kind of cool. You're all like, what's he gonna say? All right, so I'm gonna try something. Can you guys hear me? Can everybody hear me? Because I feel like Elvis Presley when I have a microphone. It's like, hey, mama, baby. I'm not gonna use the microphone, and I'm gonna roam about the room. Is that all right? Nobody's nervous about the cops being around. Don't be worried about the dog. She doesn't eat much. She's only eaten 1 finger of mine, but it grew back. That was a pretty cool introduction. So yeah, I graduated 1986. You guys are looking at that going, wow, my parents were like born back then. But it was an interesting time. Villanova was a great experience for me. I spent 3 years here. In my sophomore year, I was not good at math. I can't count to 21, right? And when I was in high school algebra, the algebra teacher, Mrs. Snively, she's around every once in a while now, she gave me a C in algebra, twice. And my father said, I'm not paying tuition for you to get C's in school. So in my junior year, he sent me to Nordhoff, right? And I was the private school boy that went to Nordhoff, and everybody looked at me like, hey, little man, what are you doing here? You belong in a private school. By the way, this is Kona. That's her name. If she wanders around, she might say hello. She gets a little nervous. It's the echo that gets her. But yeah, go ahead, walk around. Anyway, they used to put me in a trash can a lot. I was all of about 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. Sorry, I should stay at the podium, hon. I'm gonna make you follow me. Watch me, that way. All right, anyway. You guys will find out that I'm not like your typical stiff-necked cop, right? So we'll get there. Anyway, I got put in a trash can a lot as a little kid, so I learned karate. Came back here in my senior year and graduated with the class that I had started with in high school. So it was a great experience. I'm still friends with several of those classmates after many, many years. All right, who's good in math? 86 to 2022, how many years is that? I don't either know. So, don't worry about it. It's a lot, all right? It's a lot. Don't worry. It's okay. Don't worry. The cops were talking to you. It's fine. What's your last name? What's your date of birth? Just kidding. So, when I graduated high school, I wanted to be an actor. I told everybody when I graduated high school that 1 year after I graduated, I would be on national television or in a movie. And I fulfilled that prophecy. I was on the dating game. It was the only thing that I could get selected for. And yes, I didn't win. So I never got into that. My pop told me, if you want to be an actor, you're going to have to go down to Hollywood. You're going to have to wait tables and bus trays and all of that. That's the only way that you're going to get discovered. You're not going to get it up here in Ojai, California. So I decided I wanted to go into a career that would provide a pension, that would provide steady work and fun work. My mother, she wanted me to be a lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, I like to argue with people, but I didn't want to be a lawyer because, they carry around a briefcase all the time. They wear a suit and tie. They got to go talk to a stiff judge. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do a job where I wore my briefcase around my waist and I drove my office around. So I looked into the sheriff's department. And gosh, 1990, I applied in 89, and 1990 I was hired and I completed a 19-week academy. It was 19 weeks back then, it's 24 weeks now. In the middle of my academy class, actually in about week 12, the end of week 12, I was in a wrestling match with one of the other recruits and dislocated my hip, which is actually very difficult to do, I found out. And the hip went out the front, which is even more difficult to do. And so I went to the hospital and the doctor said, hey, kid, forget about it. You're not going to be a cop. You're not going to even be able to run or ride a bicycle. Maybe if you're lucky. So give it up. So I told that guy, pound sand, which means take a hike, chief. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And went and saw another doctor and got treated and fixed up. Another couple of months later, I was back in the academy, and here I am 32 plus years later working as a cop. I've run several half marathons, all of that. So that was just a testament to say there's always a possibility for you to achieve anything. So law enforcement. I picked law enforcement because it would have been a fun career. It's fun to make the camera keep moving, right? Sorry, what's your name, sir?
Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
You're going to earn your money today. So, law enforcement, right? I went in and I started working in the jails, and I was in my early 20s. And when you're in your early 20s and you're dealing with inmates, sit, good girl. That's her signal for sit, right? She's a good girl. And you're dealing with criminals, and you have limited life experience. It's kind of an interesting thing. You're like, wow, I have to grow up fast. And so I did. After I worked the jails, I went to patrol. Patrol was a lot of fun. That was probably the most fun I had as a regular deputy, because patrol is a different job back then as it is now, and it's still fun, but there's a lot more work involved. I'll talk about that in a little bit, or answer questions. Kona, stand. Good girl. All right, see, she's trained. So throughout my career, as Mr. Bunce had said, there's been several different assignments. My most favorite was actually being a drill instructor. It wasn't really a drill instructor because that's more indicative of the Marines or the Army, something like that. But as we call them, a TAC officer, a tactical officer, or a recruit training officer. And I did that for 4 years. It was a very, very challenging job, the most challenging job for me in my career. I used to tell people you could take me and throw me in the middle of an intersection in just a pair of sweats and a t-shirt with buildings burning, fires going on, people trying to kill everybody, guns going off, and all kinds of crazy chaos, and I would feel more at home there than I did at the academy, which is really kind of odd because you have to put on a persona and sort of yell at recruits and show discipline and keep them performing at a high standard. Plus, you have to model the behavior that you want them to exhibit. So it was a very interesting and challenging job. After that, I went to work in our community resource unit in the city of Camarillo, and I managed 4 school resource officers, and I conducted a lot of threat assessments. In fact, I had my team do a threat assessment or a site assessment here at Villanova and all the other schools within the county that the Sheriff's Department covered. And then I did a lot of studies on active shooters, or active assailants as we call it. It's a really weird anomaly that's really kind of blossomed in the last decade or so. So I would do training and manage threat assessments at the schools and so forth. So that was a very interesting job that I had. To get into law enforcement today, in today's day and age, it's not hard. You don't have to have a lot of education. You don't have to have much other than a high school diploma. If you get a college degree, that's good. I always recommend you go and get your college degree. I didn't. I went 3 years of college, got tired of living under my parents' rule, and I decided to take matters into my own hands for my own future, and I dropped out of college and went to the Sheriff's Academy. Funny thing is I'm old, and my mother, who's older, she says to me, "Honey, when are you going to go back to college and get your degree? It opens doors for you." And I'm like, "Ma, I'm ready to retire from the Sheriff's Department. I want to close doors," right? So maybe one day. I guess it's the School of Hard Knocks or the School of Life. What do they call that? A Rhodes Scholar? Is that what the term is? Where it's life experience that you get. And that's what I always thirsted for. Interestingly enough, how many of you guys like history as a subject? Yeah, all right. How many of you guys like algebra as a subject? My hands are down. Science. My favorite class growing up was PE. But yeah, it's interesting because outside of algebra, I love learning stuff. And I take the time to educate myself by reading as much as I can. And learning about life, about history, about science, about all kinds of stuff that I don't understand, and it's a natural thirst for that knowledge. So institutionalized education and I never got along when I was younger. Maybe one of these days I will go back to school. Who knows? I'm going to make Mr. Fox work. He's watching. I like that. So you don't need much of an education to get into law enforcement. You do need to have common sense, observational skills, writing ability, reading and comprehension. You need to be able to have physical fitness, to be able to pass an exam to get hired, and to maintain that physical fitness. We call it in the academy lifetime fitness, right? And functional fitness. After 32 plus years on the job, I weigh the same now as I did when I graduated the academy. And that's a good accomplishment. I'm not the most fit, I'm not the biggest guy in law enforcement. I know I'm huge, but I'm not the tallest and strongest and biggest guy. But I find it's very important in law enforcement that you be physically fit. And these are important factors because you're in a physically demanding job. I mean, have you ever seen a fat cop? Yeah, right? Exactly. And nothing sends a more negative message to the profession and to the public than somebody that doesn't take care of themselves and doesn't look good in uniform. And I am the biggest critic of that kind of uniformed appearance. You could be a large person and be big-boned or fluffy and so forth, but still carry yourself in a professional and efficient manner so that when you go out into the public and you're working a patrol car, you look good, you act good, and you still can do the job. That's very important. That's probably the hardest thing that law enforcement has to face in terms of their own personal physical fitness as it relates to a profession, because quite honestly, you go out, you work 24 hours a day on 12-hour shifts, you wind up eating a few donuts, you know what I'm saying? And I've had a few myself. The first one I had on duty was 10 years after I was on the job, so that goes to show you that donuts are good. All right, so being in law enforcement as a profession, I know that how many of you guys have ever had one-on-one interaction with a police officer or a sheriff's deputy? One-on-one. I do it every day. I look in the mirror and I'm like, what are you looking at? So how many of you, out of those who had your hands up, how many of those were positive interactions? How many were negative? Negative because of traffic ticket, negative because you get stopped or your parents get stopped or something. More often than not, interactions with law enforcement is a negative encounter. And that's unfortunate because what happens when your house is burning? You call the fire department, right? And the fire department comes and saves the day. But what happens when somebody breaks into your car? The sheriff's department or the police department shows up and they just take a report and they don't solve anything, right? So even then, while it's not a negative contact, it's a negative end result because we didn't do anything, right? Maybe later on down the road we find a guy that broke into your car, but law enforcement is a difficult profession to maintain as a member of law enforcement, and it's also a difficult profession for you as the public to perceive us and to receive us in terms of it being a good thing. So when I do functions like this, when I interact with the public, I look at my job as something that's different. I want to make sure that people, while they look at me and see there's an uncomfortable nature because I'm wearing a gun belt, I got the bulletproof vest, and all of that. I'm not wearing one right now, but I try to make that a positive contact. How many of you guys know how to play rock, paper, scissors? Yeah, everybody does, right? Believe it or not, rock, paper, scissors, and two other little quizzes I do. When I pull on traffic stops, I put people through rock, paper, scissors for the ticket. I pull them over for a stop sign violation. All right, I tell you what, I'm going to give you a ticket unless you want to rock, paper, scissors for the ticket. Do you want to rock, paper, scissors for the ticket?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to throw on 3. It means 1, 2, throw. You ready? All right, 1, 2, 3. I win. Rock, paper, scissors, right? So I do that. What I do is I go up to people and I do that and they're like, no! I have only lost twice in my career. I walk like I'm going to go back to the car and I stop and I come back and I'm like, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give you a ticket. I just wanted to make it a light-hearted thing for you. Do me a favor, stop at the stop sign, slow down, do whatever, and so forth. Whenever I do something like that, they always wind up coming away from that contact with a smile on their face. And then the story goes to other people. So, real quick story, and then I'll open it up to questions. And feel free to ask anything. The reason I do this is because back when the speed limit was 55, right? I pulled a car over for speeding going through Thousand Oaks. It was a station wagon full of kids. The driver, a female, young gal, probably 19 years old, 17, whatever. And she's nervous. And I'm like, all right, I pulled you over for speeding. Tell you what, give me your driver's license and everything. And I said, do you feel lucky? Where are you going? They're going to Isla Vista, Santa Barbara. They're going to go to a party. And I said, you're going to be the designated driver? Excellent, that's good. All right, I'll rock, paper, scissors you for the ticket. And she says, no. And I said, no, seriously, rock, paper, scissors. If you win, I lose, no ticket. She says, no. And all of her friends in the car are like, come on, do the rock, paper, scissors, do rock, paper, scissors. She wouldn't do it. Finally, the front seat passenger said, I'll do it. So I'm like, all right, you ready? Boom, boom. Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors, I win. They're like, no, 2 out of 3. So I go 2 out of 3. I win again, right? Meanwhile, the girl is holding the steering wheel just almost to tears, like, I don't want a ticket. So I said, all right, she lost twice. I'll be right back. So I walk back to the unit, and then I come right back. I made it probably to the gas cap of the car, and I come back and I said, listen, here's your driver's license, here's your insurance and your registration. Do me a favor. You guys are a great group of kids. Go have fun. Be safe. Don't do anything crazy. Drive carefully and just slow down a little bit. And they were all like, oh, that's so totally cool. What's your name? I tell them, Deputy Baker. Have a good night. 10 years later, I'm at a Sacramento wedding for a cousin of mine who's from Chicago. I'm at the wedding. We're sitting at the dinner party after the rehearsal, the night before the wedding, and we're all sitting around at Denny's at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they ask me, so you're the cop, what's your story? And I'm telling them stories about stuff, right? Because everybody wants to hear cop stories. So then this one girl sitting here who's a date of my other cousin from Chicago, she says, wait a minute. What's your last name? Because I told that story. And I said, Baker. And she's like, I was at that party. We were toasting you all night long. Here's the Deputy Baker. And this was 10 years later. And it was at that moment that I realized that's where positive contacts really make a difference, right? Another one that I do. Pick a number between 1 and 3. If you get the right number, I won't give you a ticket.
Okay.
Pick a number.
3.
3. All right, let me rephrase the question. Pick a number between 1 and 3. If you pick the right number, I won't give you a ticket. There we go, 2. That's the only one there. And you'd be amazed at how many people pick 3, right? Spell the word most. Spell the word coast.
Oh wait, no, CO.
Oh. Spell the word host. What do you put in a toaster?
Bread.
I do too, right? No ticket. Good job. All right, so law enforcement is a difficult profession, especially nowadays. You see stuff in the news and you see cops are doing stuff to people. You see that there's racism and all kinds of crazy stuff. Not everybody is bad. Not everybody is a jerk. Not everybody on both sides of the law enforcement thin blue line is a bad person. There are bad people out there, but one does not define all, right? If you go to school with somebody and there's somebody in your class or in the school that is always getting in trouble, does that person's behavior define you as a student or a person? Nay, nay, it does not. So law enforcement is a dying breed. I got into it because I thought I want to have a good job and an adventurous career. And I stayed with it because I developed a passion for it. I developed a drive to do good. I was picked on as a kid. Putting garbage cans, like I said, when I went to Nordhoff, you know, and the janitor rescued me and says, why would anybody want to throw a perfectly good kid away? And you know, it was just something that was in me. If you decide to look into law enforcement or something law-related as a career, I wholeheartedly encourage you to do it. This profession, you have to have a drive for it. You have to have a passion for it. I have been spit on. I have been fought with. I have been argued with. There is a lot of negative effect to this job. But those were not the things that ever really caused me stress. It was never going to a call and knocking on the door and having to fight for my life or take somebody to jail and get in a fight with them or being shot. That never stressed me out. It was always the legislation and the politics and all the things that you see on the news about racism and law enforcement being overly aggressive with people and treating people and violating rights. Those were the things that bothered me because while I never did it, I was being judged like I was in this profession. So nowadays, we have a lot more to do. So it's an interesting profession. It's been very rewarding. I have made very good contacts with both the public and I've got friends and family on the department that they're not by blood. I'm the only one in my family in law enforcement, but I've got friends and relationships that they're as close to me as if they were all my own flesh and blood. And you don't find that in every profession that you get into in the world. So, that being said, got time for questions. Who wants to ask the cop a question? Lay it on me. Let's go.
There's a microphone back there.
There's a microphone if you want to use it. And
Did you know that you're on YouTube?
did I know I'm on YouTube?
Yeah.
I am on YouTube. Not now, but I am as like, yes, for stuff.
Yeah.
Talking about catalytic converters?
Not that I know of. The only thing that came up was when you were in Camarillo, I think you did a firearm safety video guide, and that's for.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The last job that I had, before I worked at the jail now, was very community oriented. So I did do a lot of appearances on YouTube, and yeah, you know, when I retire, I am going to get into a different job. I want to get into voiceover work because I have a face for radio, and you're like, that's it, you're boring me, Dad, I'm going. So yes, that's something I'm going to get into on YouTube. That's kind of funny. It's always weird. How many of you guys think you sound weird when you hear yourself on a recording? Or that you look weird when you see yourself on video, right? Yeah, I say the same thing. Yeah, it's funky, but yeah, if you Google search me, you'll find a lot of different things, except for me doing hand farts. I can't do it very well. All right, what else? What else? Lay it on me. Yes, sir.
Do you know a Boyce and or Brenda Conway?
Hoyce or Brenda?
Boyce or Brenda Conway?
No. Where do they?
Because they're in law enforcement and they're my neighbor. So.
Gotcha. Now, believe it or not, I get that question a lot. I pull a car over, I'm in Thousand Oaks, and somebody says, "Hey, how you doing? Do you know David Fackner Person?" And I'm like, "Where does he work?" "Alabama." Yes, I do. "No kidding. Tell him I said hi." That's funny. But yes, law enforcement, we do know a lot of people. And in the academy, when I was there, I trained and graduated over 300 officers and deputies. Some of them were former DARE students. That was kind of cool. But I look at people nowadays and I'm like, oh, you look familiar. In fact, I'm recognized more than I recognize people because there's so many people that I come in contact with, case in point, right? That, you just don't remember, and it happens. So if I ever meet him, though, I'll tell him he said hello. What's your first name?
Tim.
All right, I'll tell him Tim said hello. And then they'll be like, who's Tim? All right, any other questions? Come on, we got time here. I could tell stories all day long. Lay it on me. Nice and loud, nice and loud.
All the catalytic converter thieves, like, how does that investigation work? Like, they're off and they're gone. Like, how do
Right.
you catch those people?
Catalytic converters. Okay, everything about cars, I don't know. But catalytic converters I know a little bit about. It's a little device between the engine and the exhaust pipe that converts the exhaust and sort of strains through some of the carbons and all of that stuff. There's precious metals inside of it. Platinum, gold, whatever else. And little elves with, magic wands that say stop here emissions and lets it go through. I have no idea, but they take those and cut them off and then they break them apart, pull out the precious metals, and there you go. The funny thing is they get about $200-300 for a catalytic converter when they sell it to a recycler or an illicit recycler, and then it costs you $2,000 to replace it on your car. It's kind of a bad deal. But the investigations, how we conduct those, it's a very difficult investigation to do because we can't trace one catalytic converter to one particular recycler or car unless it's marked. They're not serialized. So unless we pull a car over and they have a bunch of catalytic converters in the back seat, which they typically do, then we can make an arrest. Now we have the trouble of trying to match the CatCon to the car or the victim. And if they don't have them engraved, which we're trying to do a program where we have people engrave them, paint them, so that if we do retrieve them, we can return them to the owner and now have an actual victim that we can try a case for. But it's very difficult. It's in its infancy now because it's a new crime that's coming. I remember when identity theft was new, and my identity was stolen. Now it happens all the time, and we have quick investigations. We still can't trace a lot of stuff. So, being that catalytic converters are in its infancy in that sort of a crime, once we start to change how we protect ourselves by serializing CatCons and so forth, then we can do a better investigation. But yeah, usually we have people that know fences. A fence is a person who takes stolen property and sells it, or a person that you can sell that stolen property to. And we know these people and we check with their stocks and inventories and see what they're doing, and then we can trace it back to whoever stole it. Typically we have crews that come from LA and do that kind of stuff. It's an interesting thing, but definitely tell your folks, take it over to a garage and have it spray painted and engraved with a license plate number or the VIN number to the car. So, CatCons, interesting biz. Yes, ma'am. Nice and loud. Lay it on me.
Have you ever been shot?
Yes, my brother shot me when I was 8 years old. With a BB gun. No kidding. And he'd stand up here and tell you, yeah, I shot him. He took one step and I told him, don't take one more step, and he did. Boom, right in the stomach. But no, on the job I have not. Been close to situations. I've pulled my gun out on several incidents, had guns pulled on me. People have tried to stab me. Dogs have chased me. But no, thank goodness I haven't been shot. Hopefully I won't be. I've got less than a year left on the job, so I'm looking forward to not getting shot. I had an inmate last night, actually this morning. I worked last night to this morning, 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., so if I'm a little punchy, that's why. The inmate looks at me and she says, hey, Senior Deputy Baker, isn't it true you've been shot 4 times? And I said, more than 4 times, 17. I've had rabies shots, I've had vaccination, or I've had other shots, and they're like, no, I never had the COVID shot. No, not like that. But yeah, you gotta have a sense of humor in this, but yeah. Any other questions? There's somebody else? Yes, let's see, in the front. No, I have never shot anybody. Thank goodness. Been close. Like I say, been close. It is something that happens. And a lot of times when this question comes up in this type of presentation, the next question is, can I see your gun? And I always tell people, no, only the bad guys get to see my gun. And the other one, yes. How long did I work in the jail after the academy? Okay, I worked in the jail for about 3.5 years after I graduated the academy. And then when I promoted, the funny thing on my department is when you promote in this job, in this department, you go back to jail. Congratulations, you get a promotion, go to jail. But it's a good thing because we're responsible, our department, the sheriff's department, is responsible for custodial management in all the jail facilities, of which we have 2, the main jail and Todd Road Jail. I spent 3.5 years or so after I graduated, became bilingual in street Spanish, which was really cool. And then when I promoted, I went back for another 3 years. And now I voluntarily went back to custody to end my career because it puts me on a 12-hour shift, and I didn't want to work patrol right now. Patrol nowadays, I'm too old for that. That's a young man's game anymore. I'll do it, it's fun, but on a day-in, day-out basis, that's not something that I want to do because I do want to be able to retire healthy, happy, and without any holes in me. So jails is a good thing. Anything else? We got more questions. Come on. Yes?
How sustainable of a career would you say that this is if you want to have a family and stuff like that?
It's very sustainable. Basically, the hardest part about law enforcement is that you have to manage your time. And your significant other should be on board with the whole process. Let's say you get on this job and you meet somebody afterwards. You bring them up to speed. You let them know what to expect. You let them know what the hours are like and the on-call stuff and the stress of the job. And plus the stress that the spouse will have on whether or not you're going to come home at the end of shift. But it's very manageable. It's not a difficult thing. Every relationship that I've been in has been fine. We haven't had anything to suffer from the job. But then again, I was raised to communicate. And in fact, I've been told that I communicate a lot. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to know everything, but communication is key in any relationship too, and especially with this profession. As long as you understand what you're getting into, if you get into it, and your significant other understands what you're going to be doing, you can totally make it work. It's not difficult at all. All you need is love and communication. All right, what else? Come on, we got time. We got like 2 more hours of this, and kids are falling asleep. This is amazing. This reminds me back when I was in Mr. Bunce's class, and I was able to master and perfect the art of sleeping with my eyes open. Right? I'd get my neck kind of like this, and
It's the only time you were quiet.
Exactly. He'd say, who's snoring? It wasn't me. I had a couple of hands over here somewhere. Yes, sir. Question was, have I ever used my taser? Oh, goodness, yes. Yes. The taser is a fun tool. In fact, it's really odd. People will say this is one of the odd things about Senior Deputy Baker on the Sheriff's Department. I tase myself. I do that. I've been tased formerly with the probes and the shots and everything where you lock up and all of that twice. But we have what's called a drive stun. A drive stun is when you take the taser out and you have a spark check, and it's basically just the sparks here. The probes don't go shooting out. But we train, when we go through the training for the taser, we have the option to be tased, both drive stun, which is just localized contact pain. Good girl. And it hurts for the moment that the contact is made, but then it stops as soon as the electricity stops. But I always tell my recruits, I always tell my deputies, the young deputies, that you should train with the taser and know what it feels like. When you do your spark check, which is to make sure that you have an arc and you run it for 5 seconds to make sure your taser is operable, take that thing and hit yourself on the leg or in the arm or on the chest. Just a quick hit, because the only time you're ever going to get tased as a peace officer is when you're on duty. And when are you going to get tased? Or rather, who are you going to get tased by? Your darn partners. right? Because you're going to be on the ground fighting with somebody, and somebody's going to pull a taser out, and they're going to say, stop resisting, stop resisting. And I'm going to turn around and look, but he's still fighting me. And then they're going to shoot the taser, and it's going to hit me. So I want to know what's going to feel like, and I want to know how bad it's going to hurt, and I want to not be afraid of it. Because people are afraid of the taser. I pull it out, and people are like, hey man, don't shoot me with that, right? And that's a natural reaction. But if you understand what it's like to be tased, then it doesn't scare you as much. It hurts, but it doesn't scare you as much. Interesting thing about the tasers, when you get the full probes, you get one stuck into you in your upper and lower body, and you have that full lockup, and you fall down. I'm sure everybody has seen this on YouTube or some sort of other medium on the internet. I thought when I went through it the first time that I was going to black out. My consciousness would be stopped for like 5 seconds, or I wouldn't be able to hear or see. None of it. You can hear everything. It just feels like your body is exploding and imploding with every sound or every pop of that electricity going through your body. So you know what it sounds like when the pop, 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 pop happens. It's really fast. It feels like your body in your chest cavity is just like that fast. And then as soon as it's done, it's over. It doesn't hurt anymore. There's no residual pain except for the probes that really hurt when they pull them out. Does that answer your question? Yes. I like using the taser. It's fun. Yes, sir.
What would happen if you had a pacemaker and you were tased or something like that?
It would do the same effect, but it wouldn't have an adverse effect on the pacemaker itself. That's it. Good girl. There was a question over here. Yes, sir.
You ever been a part of a drug bust?
Yes. Many drug busts. I have a raid vest and all of that stuff. I brought it, but I didn't want to carry everything all over here. I have a helmet and 2 vests to wear, the raid jacket. But drug busts and stuff like that, we've performed search warrants and done the bam, knock the door down and go in. It's really a lot of fun. You get a lot of adrenaline. Law enforcement is not all action. For every action, there is Kona. There's an equal and opposite reaction, and she's reacting. She'll be fine. I think she's just going to lay down and underneath. Kona. She'll be fine. She's not going to pee. There you go. In law enforcement, when we do something, when we have action, you get in a foot pursuit or a driving pursuit. I've been in both, many of them. Typically when I get into a driving pursuit, at the advent of cell phones, I will call my brother on the cell phone and put it on speakerphone and then set the phone down and let him listen to the pursuit. He loves it. And he's like, go back to patrol and get into pursuit just so I can hear another one. But you have to do a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of writing involved, which is why I say it's important to be able to know how to write, and it's important to be able to have good communication skills in this profession, because where did she go? We're back in there? This guy's boring me. So yeah, it's not always running and gunning and having the fun that way. You do have to write a lot about it. And the better you write, the less you have to testify in court. But it's a great fun job, and a lot of adventure to be had. More questions? Come on, I love this. Mr. Bunce.
You've already mentioned that the writing skills are important. What other aspect of your education here at Villanova do you find yourself using a lot?
At Villanova, I learned, I was already brought up in the church and faith and everything, but I also learned how to interact with people in a more compassionate way. And that's always been sort of my forte, my way of doing this job. Some people get into it and they're big people and they can muscle their way through it. Like I said, I'm not the biggest guy on the department, but I've had to be able to communicate my way through it. And one of the things I learned at Villanova was have compassion and to have a good approach to people, be accepting and open, and interact with people in a positive way. And if you treat other people the way you want to be treated, 99% of the time, it's going to be a positive outcome. There's always 1%, and 1% sometimes seems to dominate things, but when you look at the whole picture over my career, having compassion for my fellow man is probably one of the most important things that I took from Villanova, and being able to communicate with people. That's big. Thank you for that question. All right, what else? All right, in the back.
Okay, so just a quick one overview. If this is
The biggest takeaway from law enforcement for me, or at least the biggest lesson that I've learned, is just what I had said. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And I still say that to this day to inmates. In fact, I worked this weekend, and over this weekend, I had a conversation with an inmate, and I said, if you just calm down, put yourself in check, treat us the way you want us to treat you, be respectful, you will live your life a lot better. So after such a long time in this profession, I still at least try to put the right foot forward and treat other people the way I want to be treated. And then what was the second part of the question again?
The second part was, what would you say to kids who are basically struggling to, like, want to get out of college and do something else? Because I heard that there's a lot of anxiety when that comes to that.
Yeah.
So what would you say
There
to
is.
help at least calm that kid down?
Stick it through. If I could change anything, not that I would, because if I had to change anything, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today, right? If I changed my past. But I hear her digging. You guys see her? She's scraping? She's nervous. That's why. It's you. You make her nervous. Just kidding. So
She's not the first.
this is true. I am. Stick with your education. The best and smartest thing you can do is cultivate your brain. Formal institutionalized education, high school, college, that's going to be the foundation upon which everything else you learn is based. And I would probably say I'd go back to college, or stick college out and get my bachelor's degree. I'm actually one class away from an associate's degree and one semester, or rather year, away from a bachelor's degree. And that probably would have changed my destiny. I would have been a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps, like my dad. So if I'd stuck through with school. But I would say to anybody, follow through with your education, carry on with it, because that's the best thing that you can do to provide for your future and ensure a positive outcome in your future. It also opens doors for you, as my mother said. All right? You bet. Thank you. Great question. We looking at time? I can always sense. I've got an answer then. Who knows the history of cops and donuts? This guy, right? Why are cops always associated with donuts? And it's not a joke, this is actually historical fact. Because back in the 30s and 40s, when cops were out there patrolling the streets 24 hours a day, at 2 o'clock in the morning, no restaurants. There were no restaurants, no Circle K's, no 7-Elevens, nothing that was open 24 hours. But Tony Fracassetti or Chuck Mangione, the guy that ran the donut shop, would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, get to the donut shop, and start making donuts in the morning at 3 o'clock, or so, give or take. So the cops got to know the guys that had the donut shops, and they'd stop by and get a cup of coffee. And then Tony Fracassetti, the guy that owns the donut shop, he'd be like, hey, you want to have a donut? He's like, sure, I'll have a donut, thank you. And there it became how cops and donuts always got affiliated. So now you know that's part of history. It's just like a natural occurrence.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.